Hey, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Felipe and I'm a social skills and confidence coach. In today's interview, I'm interviewing a very special friend of mine. His name is Jay Samant. The reason I wanted to interview him is because he's one of the warmest, really most sincere and inviting people I've ever met. And I wanted to share what his take is on socializing, on connecting with people, as well as how he approaches relationships. In this interview, we talk about everything from social justice, the education system, the right mindset to connect with people, as well as create an impact in people, as well as in society in general. If you like this video, please subscribe, like the video, give it a thumbs up, and definitely check out some of my other videos on this channel. All right, enjoy. I'm here with Jay Samant. So welcome, Jay. Thanks for being here.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
Just kind of give a brief overview of who you are, kind of where you came from, and a little bit of a background on who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. So a little bit about me. I am actually immigrant. So I'm of South Asian heritage. I'm Indian. And after my parents got married, I actually was born in Wales, United Kingdom, and then immigrated here to New York when I was about 5 years old. Definitely, I think a lot of it, family ties, really important, especially in the Indian community. My parents, they made a lot of sacrifices. They came from really humble beginnings from India, both born and raised in Mumbai. They both had, from very poverty of Mumbai. My dad grew up with 8 siblings, my mother with 5 siblings, and resources were really scarce, but their real weapon to kind of escape poverty was education. That beginning, really kind of, sparked my interest, especially, how I saw, my parents really making the sacrifices for our family. And even though that they were, below the poverty line, essentially were able to, raise us middle class in the States and, really made all those sacrifices for us, really eternally grateful for it. So that was kind of one component of what really sparked my interest in education and wanting to work, especially with the social inequities. And really right now that's really transpiring, especially in the pandemic, of people of color. That was kind of one, component. And I started off as a high school special education teacher. I had a really great friend. We still are very good friends from undergrad. I played on the men's tennis team in undergrad, and our team manager, he had multiple disabilities. He was one of the first people that I had a daily interaction with that was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. He was also on the spectrum, and he also had Tourette's.
Oh, wow.
And so he had, quite a few different challenges just daily regarding the medications, his regimens, but always just had a smile on his face. It was just such a positive, really, for me, I just admired so much about him. Going to school, furthering his education, we developed such a deep friendship. It actually made me really interested in wanting to pursue my master's in special education, because I wanted to become a more versatile educator and was hoping that, to minimize those achievement gaps with students with disabilities. That's kind of how I ended up doing a master's, went and started as a special education teacher in Virginia. So I've moved around a bit, lived in Virginia Beach for a while, lived there for 5 years and worked as a district leader then in special education. And that was a really great experience. But I felt removed since I was working central office from relationships with students. And so I really wanted to, get back into school building leadership. That's actually how I ended up here in Denver. This was the only job I applied to, the school I worked to, Stride Prep Rise High School in Denver. Didn't know anything about Denver.
Oh, that's the only one you applied for?
Only applied, yeah. Didn't know anything about Denver, didn't know anything really about Colorado. I knew that there were beautiful mountains, had no idea until I came here how beautiful they really are. But
yeah.
I saw they had an emphasis on social justice and wanted to, promote a higher education and education in different facets for particularly students from low income, backgrounds and people of color. And so I was just amazed by this mission and vision, and I was all about it. So now working as a vice principal of instruction and really primarily working on teacher growth, supporting the coaching and professional development of teachers and curriculum development and leadership. So really been such a great opportunity.
That's incredible. And I really want to dig into the whole education aspect and get really your perspective on the inequalities and everything like that. Before we get into that, I'm curious, as you're moving city to city, one of the things that strikes me about you is that you can really make connections very easily and very genuinely as well. How have you been building relationships as you move from place to place?
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that, Felipe.
Yeah.
That's a really great question. Kind of a little bit about my identity as far as being an immigrant, then plus being a person of color,
Mm,
and then also trying to bridge, you know, almost first generation in the sense I was, immigrated here when I was 5. So trying to balance all of that out actually gave me kind of a different perspective, and I think unique perspective on people, and just wanting to immerse myself and learn whether it was someone of similar cultural background as me or people of different heritages. I've always really enjoyed. I think high school was really like kind of where that sparked. I loved sports. I played tennis, I played soccer, but then I also was part of like student council and theater. And so I think I had, kind of friends dabbled a little bit everywhere, and had friends from different, social networks. And I think that was my first real exposure to just, being able to connect with different types of people. And I felt very fortunate to have that. I think then I had to learn early on. Yeah, I've moved around a bit. I've lived in various different places in New York after, high school and college, and got my first master's in a different part of New York then too. And then directly moved to Virginia where I didn't know anyone. And I think, yeah, that really, trying to make people friends from work sometimes can be difficult and challenging, especially
sure.
when I was 24 years old and I was by far the youngest,
Oh, really?
colleague. Yeah. I think the next youngest was like 15 years, older than me. So it was definitely, they were great. I learned a lot professionally from them, but I think it kind of forced me, very
To be
early
very
on.
adaptable. No, it seems like you're very flexible in
Yeah, I
different
think,
situations.
no, I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think especially then moving here to Denver, I learned a lot from a lot of educators and professionals, which was great in Virginia. One major other reason why I left though too was that I was first time really exposed. Being from New York, I was exposed to all kinds of people of all ethnicities, diversity. Very fortunate about that.
Yeah.
But I think when I passed that Dixie line and got into the South, very different exposure to different things. Sunday was almost the most segregated day, and I had no idea when I
Oh,
moved to
really?
Virginia, based on churches. Yeah, lots of people
Oh,
that were
wow.
black went to historically black churches, and same for like Caucasians, and it was very, yeah, very.
This is in 1960, right? You're really old.
Yeah,
In the
we
60s.
won't, we won't, yeah, expose my age. Yeah, I don't want to embarrass anyone. That's how old I am. But no, yeah,
That's crazy,
no,
man. I mean, because
yeah,
especially when you have people from around the world, you've traveled quite a bit. I've traveled quite a bit. They don't really realize how still segregated it can be in certain
yeah,
areas here.
absolutely. So I think that was why, when I came to Colorado and especially Denver, just it's great. I think that there's just people of all different types of backgrounds. I've been able to really connect again, similar as like New York. Um,
Mm,
and I think really it's, I think to really be honest with you, it's very easy in my opinion to meet people. And mainly why I say that, I think it's easy to meet people. I think it's hard to make genuine connections, but I've been
mm,
lucky and fortunate. My parents also, traveling was a big component, passion for me. But even at a young age, my parents always took us on vacations, but it wasn't your, normal, hey, we're going to Hawaii type of vacation, or we're going to, some, exotic,
resort.
beach resort. No, we were going, to third world developing countries,
Yeah, nice.
and it was really such an eye opening, great experience. And I'm really glad, and, just have a lot of gratitude that my parents exposed us to my sisters and I, to some of the atrocities at a young age, because it made us learn the importance of family and developing connections with people, especially seeing this in developing countries. That's all people have. It's just, wow, like we're so spoiled here as Americans. We
Mm,
have this and that, everything at our fingertips. And especially seeing where my parents growing up, and my parents always emphasize the importance of giving back to a community, because the community will give back to you. To get back to your question,
yeah,
I think volunteering and philanthropy has actually really helped me, my passion for that, in connecting with such great people, like yourself and other really just like-minded people that still have different stories, but I think we're able to come together and around, a great cause, and that always leads to great memories. So I think that's been really a great way for me. And it's helped me just to become more extroverted. I just love kind of getting involved in whatever it is, making genuine connections, even if it's just networking with young professionals. And
that's definitely how we met. I mean, we're volunteering for the local food bank of the Rockies. I think the idea of philanthropy and the idea of giving puts people in a different mindset. I know from hosting events for charity and doing this volunteer stuff, you meet some of, whether they're in that specific mindset or whether you're meeting that type of person, I think you do meet some really high quality, like-minded people. Now, in regards to the philanthropy aspect of it, all these trips kind of started that spark for you. That how did that start for you? Like, was it going to some of these trips and kind of realizing, yeah, that some people don't have it as good as I might have it, type of thing? Is that kind of what sparked it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think some of it had to do with that. I think also coupled with having just, loving to working with children, my passions in education. I just really love, yeah, keeping myself active and busy. And, I've always been kind of practitioner based mindset. And I think just the opportunity to just connect with people and being able to do something that's productive has always been something, yeah, really inspiring for me, especially, feeling that I've been, very fortunate in my life to have, just a very supportive family and friends. And so it's really just a great way to get connected. I think my passion grew from, just being able to have some of the opportunities like humanitarian work and volunteering through education and just with my job and in leadership. And then that kind of opened the door, I think, to me, kind of working with nonprofits. And so I started first off really working with, a lot of nonprofits that, kind of engaged with children, and as far as like raising funds for children, whether it was health organizations or educational organization nonprofits. But then I got when I moved to Denver, I joined Mile High Young Professionals, and a couple of years later I was nominated as a co-chairman of the Philanthropy Committee. And I think that was just such a great opportunity, and some of the different partnerships that I was really able to develop and collaborate was just phenomenal. I was able to really work with a bunch of different young professionals, some of those people who are my closest friends, and work with 30 different nonprofits in Colorado and just coordinate some official quarterly volunteer events. And I think each nonprofit, it's almost addicting for me because each nonprofit has a different cause and just such a different experience that you get to really incorporate. For example, I could give, Denver Rescue Mission, having the opportunity to prepare and serve over hundreds of meals to people in the Denver community that are experiencing homelessness, to, a humble opportunity to work with and support and volunteer with Extreme Community Makeover, where, we partnered to support low socioeconomic neighborhoods and graffiti removal, alley cleanup, landscaping, things like that, to wildlife restoration and working and restoring trails in Red Rocks by rebuilding, trails to sustain wear and tear use. So I think that
all
really
in one day, right? All in one day.
all in one day. Yeah.
You put on your cape behind you, right?
No, but like I think yeah, back to your question, I think definitely each of those opportunities grew my passion even more.
Yeah.
Because each of those were different experiences with and meeting different people.
Right.
And even if it was with the same people, some who have become, as I said, my really good friends, we had a different experience together. Built those relationships. So I almost feel like they're intertwined, connecting with people and volunteering. In my perspective, like it's really in my life has, meshing those two together almost go hand in hand for me, because each volunteering and nonprofit experience I've had is just been a phenomenal, different type of experience. Plus like the bonds you build with the people that you're working and collaborating with.
That's incredible, man. I think a lot of people, when they're having issues with connecting, they're in a new city. Yeah, you might think of Meetup, which is great, but volunteer work, charity events, all these different things just open up a lot of doors for some incredible networks beyond the professional, beyond all that kind of stuff, into some, like you said, some really genuine people that want to help and want to make a difference in the world. So now I want to get into the mind of Jay in terms of past and future. I'm curious, since you kind of took us through your history, if you could go back to a specific age, first of all, what age would that be, and in what would you teach that younger version of Jay?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I'd probably go back to 18-year-old Jay.
Really?
Just where, all
Is
the
this
fun's
right
about
after
to
high school
start.
type of thing?
Right after high school. I had a great high school experience. I think similar to all of us.
Dude, honestly, I think you've had all great experiences. You seem like you've been very, very charmed, man. Like it's like everything just kind of flows for you.
But I think you think that's your world, right? Like high school, like at the time, like you're not exposed to anything else. And it's almost like, it's funny though. I had a lot of transitioning periods, and 18-year-old me was still not sure about my identity. And, it took me a very long time, all of my 20s. I don't think that really established that until my 30s, until, early 30s.
what does that mean, your identity, like in terms of
Yeah,
what you like, your preferences, like what you're
I would
about
say
in life?
definitely. Yeah, like definitely like my, who am I really? What
Mm,
are my preferences? What are things that I really do enjoy? It was almost that I was getting caught up since I wanted to make connections with so many other people. I almost got caught up with, well, who am I? Like, what is my identity? What do I actually like? And I think people started making assumptions since I loved just genuinely making connections with everyone that like, oh, you like this, you like that. And I think the 18-year-old Jay, if I could give him some advice, is just pick a like one, two things of interest and just, and just go with that. Because the others
yeah,
can just be distractors, and then you get stressed, and you kind of lose sight of what's the important goal. And I think that that is really definitely, I would say I would love to go back to that time, especially to relive, just college. I mean, that was such a great experience in itself. But I think just having, going back with that mindset and like focusing just on, other than academics, like focusing on like one or two major interests,
yeah.
and really just developing, growth in those areas. I think that I was trying to dabble in everything, and then it was like jack of all trades, but not master of anything.
The Renaissance
So,
man.
so I said, yeah, I would say going back to that time, I still didn't have a lot of confidence then,
Mhm.
because I didn't know who I was. And so, I was this kid that, was almost technically first generation, early immigrant, to trying to figure out, balancing between, my culture and like the values my parents had raised us, to then trying to live into, assimilate into American society. And 18J, like it was a very interesting time because my parents had never gone to college here, in the States. And so I was, the first male in my family to go to college. And so I think I didn't really know how to handle that. There was no one to really kind of guide me and hold my hand and mentor me, through that process. And so uh, I definitely don't regret any of the mistakes that were made. I think I learned from them,
Yeah.
along with the successes and all of those moments. I think that's just part of being a young adult. But I think I got so caught up. Sometimes I forgot who my identity was, and I think going back to that, that would have been a great opportunity. And I didn't really have the opportunity to develop that until I went to graduate school, my first master's, when I was about 22 years old. And I went to Binghamton, and that school was very much compared to my undergrad school. My undergrad school was not very diverse. I went there to play tennis. It's the whole reason why I
Gotcha.
went there. And then when I went to Binghamton University, that was the first, time I got exposed to. I joined the Indian Student Association. Like I got to be part of the Binghamton Bhangra team, which was it's traditional Punjabi, Indian Northern dance mixed with hip hop, and that was great. Like I got, I developed a lot of pride of my culture, and also got to meet other people of different other cultures, and I went to all kinds of events. So I think that was like a really great opportunity to really embrace my identity and like really what my interests were and my passions. And then also furthering, my master's in special education during that time. So when I was still trying to figure it out at 18 years old, like what am I going to major in, and also who, what is really my identity. So I would say that.
It's as you say all that, a lot of thoughts come up. The first one is I would have never guessed that you were not born here, basically. And the second thing that pops up is that I've had a similar experience in terms of becoming very flexible, becoming jack of all trades, and figuring out different interests and not knowing exactly what I'm about and all this kind of stuff, because especially coming from another culture and a culture that your parents' culture is very different. You just have to adapt, or you're just won't fit in, and it's a very much a survival thing when you're a kid. And I can completely relate to that. I think for me it was until college days that I really found out what I was about and started kind of really gaining more confidence and working on that. So how did you get more confidence? How did you become to, I guess, not only get clear on who you are, but really began to build comfort around who you really were?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it was really the connection, the first connection, as I told you, with my good friend Zach.
Mm,
He's a lifelong friend, and we're still very good friends. And he was the reason why. Yeah, I think that was when I really developed a passion of something that I was interested in learning
yeah.
more about with special education. Since I had no real exposure on a daily basis with someone with multiple disabilities. He was the first person ever.
Wow.
And it developed my interest. Yeah, which is really sad to really think about it too, that I was, 19, 20 years old until I really had that exposure to, to someone with a disability. And so for me, like that was really eye-opening. And I think I really learned just all of the things, challenges and obstacles Zach had to just do daily that we take, for granted, waking up or going to bed whenever we want to, and, all of those type of things. So I think that really developed a passion. Like I didn't really still know until the end of undergraduate school that I was really passionate about education, specifically special education. When I really started developing more of my identity was really when I went to graduate school, because I still think my mind was still young.
Mm-hmm.
In my perspective, 18, 22, your brain is still developing. And, I think I still, thank goodness that I did get my teaching license in undergraduate, and I could have been a history teacher, but thank goodness I decided, and I met Zach, decided to go get my master's, because I still needed those 2 years of maturity before I could have been in a classroom, I think.
Right.
So, I mean, we might have been having a very different talk here. Maybe I would have never became a vice principal if I would have taught right there. But no, I think it's all about going back, connections with people. And I think I was making a lot of surface level connections with people in undergrad. But I really, like, Zach was the first person in undergrad that I made a genuine, deep connection with.
Wow.
And I think the relationships is where it built my confidence. And then when I went to graduate school, my best friends were all doing, I mean, they were just, doing amazing things. Like one's a dentist now. Another one's getting his master's right now in biotechnology from UPenn, one of the best Ivy League distinguished schools. Yeah. And I say that because they're much more intelligent people than I am, but it was great. I think someone once told me that you are the culmination. I think I heard this at a leadership seminar. You are the culmination of the top 5 people you surround yourself with.
Yeah.
And I really do hold that to heart, because I think when I finally went to graduate school, the 5 people I was surrounding myself with were just, incredible people, really focused, very ambitious. And it developed my confidence that, we were all supporting each other through that process. And we just wanted genuinely the best for each other. And I think that developed my confidence too, that like, hey, like, all of my best friends are doing great things, and they're pursuing their goals. I want to do the same. And I think that really kind of really nudged me in the right direction into, like, as far as developing my confidence with my identity, coupled with, professionally trying to, reach my goals.
And I think you hold to that. I mean, as you've invited me to different events, I've met a lot of your friends. They're not only are they great people, really, really nice people, but also they are go-getters. They're very motivated. They're quite something. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about, and one of the things that I'm really passionate about as well, is education, actually. So I'm curious, what's your take on education, on the inequality for minorities, whether it's special education or whether it's for people of color?
There's definitely with the educational inequalities right now. I think with the pandemic, it puts a new whole component. But before I even get to that, even prior to the pandemic, the achievement gaps. There's a lot of inconsistencies in standardized test scores, rates of high schools, graduation rates, especially with students and kids of color. I mean, this even goes back to generations. And also there's schools such as like Title I schools versus non-Title I schools. And so a lot of schools, as far as if you are a Title I school, that means, and I actually work at a Title I school. Our school, for example, there's 90% of students are eligible for free and reduced lunch. And so we are recognized as a Title I school. So there's like certain grants that we get. But with that, I mean, if we think about this even in simplistic, thinking about the inequalities in standardized tests like the SAT, our students can't, their families, I mean, if you ask them about the SAT and about private tutoring, that's something they're totally unfamiliar with, right?
Foreign,
like that's just very foreign. Exactly. Whereas if you go to Cherry Creek School District, a very affluent school district with very small percentage of minorities, predominantly white, I mean, that's something that all the kids are getting. Every single, student, their families ensuring. And that is like the major test, that rigorous test that only really assesses kids' skills and certain skills in math and reading and literacy and writing, that determines a kid's next future for the next
Right.
4 years. And it's a really, definitely a shame. I know that's another whole conversation regarding that test, but definitely that's an inequality. And then also looking at, just inequalities of lack of resources, right? I mean, if you're from a school district with, particularly with like gerrymandering and neighborhoods being kind of, distributed, certain neighborhoods then, and urbanized populations only have certain funding for their school, as opposed to, more affluent neighborhoods have so much other funding for their school and for their resources. And so, then you also notice the gaps between that as well. I think there's the biggest also gaps, as we've noticed, is social, right? The social justice inequalities, that are even going on with our society. That definitely, I think definitely puts a different challenge for any person of color.
Yeah.
Particularly like I think our Black and Latino populations. And we see right now the pandemic, as I was saying, that's another whole obstacle, right? Like we're seeing at just such terrible, there's just such big, maximal, as far as those two subgroups dying and, getting this airborne, virus, like at such an exponential rate than any other, race or any other ethnicity. Then if we look at families, a lot of my families, for example, at our school, they're essential workers. 90% of our students are Hispanic Latino. And then our second biggest minority is Black. And tons of our families, my school is located in far northeast Denver. So if we look at that, even just as a case study, lots of those parents are working at the airport. Lots of those families are working at the hospital, at CU Anschutz. Lots of them are essential workers at restaurants, things like that.
Wow.
And so, and then you're putting a whole new, they're potentially putting their jobs, they're risking their lives, right, to protect us and to make sure we're still functioning as a community, coupled with that they have children, with schools out. I mean, high school, we're fortunate that our kids are pretty self-independent and, they're able to access Zoom, but I can only even imagine, for families that have, young, children that are attending, pre-K or elementary or even middle school, trying to then find childcare and spend $40,000 to $70,000 annually for that, or do you sacrifice not working? And the way it's impacted our students, a lot of our high school students are also working as essential workers to provide for the family. So that, I mean, this pandemic is putting a whole burden on our own students that are 14 to 18 years old.
Wow.
They're having to work, they're having to be an adult, in the sense like they're not getting the same, access to education as some of their other, non, colored peers.
Yep.
And that they're having to also, some of them are providing for the families. The parents have been laid off. And then our kids are also, we've had several cases that they have COVID. Some are homeless now too. And so I think the pandemic has put all these other challenges of people and young people of color. And then that is even broadening the gap in inequities in education for them. And so, we're, really trying our best to figure out, and navigate through this. I know as all of us are as educators, but definitely I think those type of burdens. On top of that, I don't know if you ever felt this way, Felipe, but, going to college, I was a little fortunate to have some experience, and there were some minorities in my school, but in high school, I was the only Indian male. And then to go to college, my undergrad was also, on the tennis team, I was the only Indian male, like around campus, there weren't very many, people of South Asian heritage. And so when I went back to, and you asked me that question, what time would you go back? That's the time, because, I was confused with my identity, and that's happening to a lot of our students graduating, and we're trying to build up to make sure that they know what their identity is, since we're emphasis on social justice school. But it's hard, I think, when, especially for a lot of kids coming from, unrepresented backgrounds, going to college, they're first generation, right? College,
Yeah.
a lot of them. And I can only imagine being first generation, trying to navigate. You don't see people that look like you. You don't have professors that look like you. And then you're trying to navigate that, and you don't really have a support system because you're the first one trying to figure all of this out. And so I think that also attributes to, an oppressive type of system. And so that's where the disparities are and the gaps I definitely see for students and young people of color in education right now.
Yeah, that brings a lot that brings up a lot of stuff for me. And before I kind of go into that, I don't want to lose this thought that came as well, which is you spoke about equities of education. For you, what in the ideal world, what are the biggest pillars to create equity in education for everyone?
Yeah, it's a great question. I really think that our job as a high school educator is to really, first of all, develop them as lifelong learners, like teach them the importance of education. And the particular emphasis needs to be on identity, the identity work. And I think that also,
Nice.
has a couple different components, which I would say definitely social justice. Like, we want to make sure that our young people are social justice, community focused members, that they understand the severity of social justice issues. So I really do think it's important that we explain to our students and young people, and have them actually practice and develop projects and hands-on based learning on very, controversial current trends and topics such as mass incarceration, immigration, environmental justice, right? Gender inequality. I think all of those type of examples are primary exemplars of where our students need to be educated on, so that they can really form, in research, and also form, their own. We want them to develop their own thoughts, but it should be grounded, right, in research. And we want to develop their public speaking skills. I think that's another important component, particularly in professionalism, public speaking skills, and the writing skills, because those are all skills no matter what you do, whether you want to go, whether you want to go into vocational education, like becoming an electrician, to if you want to go get your PhD or go to medical school, you need to have those basic skills, right? Professionalism, public speaking skills, right? For any type of interview or any type of,
It's crazy that you mentioned all this stuff, and perhaps for some people listening to this or watching this, it might seem just very basic skills, but it's the type of skills and the type of reality that as a minority we don't really get to experience, or really get to maybe have your parents as an example. For me, as you mentioned all that stuff, like relate absolutely to everything, from being the only Mexican dude in the soccer team. It's freaking soccer. There's supposed to be more Mexicans, right? It was a wealthy, majorly white school as well as there's also an aspect that I don't think it's often talked about in regards to the different inequalities, which is there's also an aspect of, I think, of economical status, and in many, and also obviously education. For my parents, for example, not only was I a minority as a Mexican, but I was of low income, which meant definitely not a lot of access to different resources, education, and different things. And coming from a very very small town in Mexico, my parents didn't go further than third grade. So for them, they knew education was important, but they weren't an example for that. And I honestly, it wasn't because of I don't think I've ever talked to you about this, but I think it's a very good segue. If it wasn't for a learning center that I was a part of since I got here into the U.S., I was 7 years old. It was a learning center funded by Boulder County Housing and Human Services. If it wasn't for that and the access that it gave me to mentors, that it gave me to public speaking, to different resources, this learning center, it's called Casa de la Esperanza, which means House of Hope, and it's still going strong after 20 some years. This learning center also kind of provided mentors that I could relate to, anybody that could just provide an example of professions and possibilities that were available to me, that if you are just limited to your nucleus of family, you might not have that, especially if it is like you're saying, a lot of people that are in the what's it called, in different professions of service, you might not have that. Your parents might be working at a factory like mine were. Not only is it in terms of knowing your potential and all this kind of stuff and your identity, wherever you come from, but it's also about demystifying education, because it can be very daunting to not know anything about what college is about, or even if you care about it, when you don't have an example to follow, as I'm sure it was for you.
Absolutely. No, that's
Yeah.
super powerful what you just said. And I feel that, yeah, I mean, that's awesome. Learning Center sounds like an incredible place. And I think you really hit a great point. Yeah. I think that, the performance gaps, that really reflects extensive, unmet needs and untapped talents among, low socioeconomic children. So it's almost like, I think that it's just that the access isn't definitely the same. It's a oppressive system to people of color right now. Overall,
Yeah.
it's definitely there's definitely a gap, and it's almost, I think we're doing, and this is just my philosophy, kids a disservice in a way when we tell them, hey, especially kids of color, when we tell them, hey, you don't need to go to college. I personally hate when anyone says that you don't need to go to college, because to a person of color, a child of color, because you're already ingraining in their head that, something that is, to them, oh, okay, maybe that means I can't achieve that. I shouldn't even bother, and there's nothing, I mean, obviously I have, family members that didn't go to college and have done, really well. And that's great. But we all know that college also, if you do get a college degree, it does open more avenues, more opportunities. I mean, the data also shows that your annual income is, tripled overnight with that college degree, and then even extends if you decide to, further your education, graduate degree. So it's almost, to me, when someone says it to a child of color, I feel like that's an oppressive system telling them that you can't achieve that. No, we should be promoting, I think, all of our children, especially our children of color, to apply to college, that it's an option. If that's something that they don't want, that's a different story. But then we develop with them, what's your plan? Okay, great. And like how I said, and, I agree with you. Yeah, that's still in education. I think it is our duty to help develop that plan as far as, okay, whether you're going into vocational education, higher education, it's all education, right? And so, or the workforce, it's still, you're still going to have to learn things. You're still going to probably have to get some type of certificate at some point if you want to get promoted. So we need to teach them, like how I said, I think the basic foundations of professionalism, of public speaking skills,
Yep.
writing skills. And then I think, as I said, that last component is really important. I think particularly for kids of color is social justice. Like I really do think that that's something that we need to come together and unify, because no matter what ethnicity background you come from as a person of color, we've all experienced some type of racism or some type of discrimination. That may look different, but we've all experienced it. And so, we do need to come together, and people do need to realize that their voice, can be heard and should be heard. And we want to be able to develop, I think, as an educator, develop with young people of color, giving them the avenues of knowing how to use that voice, how to effectively use that voice in the community and society. So I think those are really the four components, really important, most important components, I think, in developing with children of color.
That's incredible, man. So, Jay, in the future, where do you see the mind of Jay going in the future?
Oh
Where do you see
man, that is a great
going to in
question.
the future? Yeah, I'm curious, man. I mean, you have. I really mean it. I think you're creating an impact every day, simply by being around you people. I think just you give off a great energy, and beyond the amazing work that you do. So where are you headed, man?
Well, I appreciate that. No, I
Yeah.
really
No,
do.
and I mean it. I really do. I'm not lying this time.
No, yeah. So
Yeah.
I really love education. I don't think I'll ever leave. I'm always going to be a lifelong educator, because
Yeah.
kids are the best teachers. They've taught me everything I know. And I continue needing to learn, right? Like, the work's never done in education, and I'm continuing to learn from them, because they're teaching me to be a more versatile school leader, particularly during this, even pandemic time that we are, this interesting time now. So I've been working on some professional goals. At the last leg of my doctoral degree, hopefully on the dissertation phase right now.
Nice, man. Congrats.
I appreciate that. In educational policy plan and leadership will be my doctorate in. So I'll be hopefully defending this summer.
Wow.
So I think that will open some new avenues for me. I originally thought that, I wanted to go the vice principal, superintendent route, but now that's been kind of the priority along with work. And so once that's done, I think potentially maybe looking at being, school principal, but might even look at other avenues. One I've been kind of dabbling with and thinking about is really having the opportunity to just, work as a leader and training other aspiring school leaders. And so that may be, looking at some type of, program where I got to, really hone in on that. And then along with that, I'd love to kind of be an adjunct professor for a school of education, teaching aspiring teachers and aspiring school leaders.
Wow.
Mainly because, one only thing I'd say, I was lucky and fortunate to have really great, professors, and programming for education. But I definitely learned much more from the professors that were much more effective for my learning were the ones that had the actual practical experiences, like were actually teachers, school leaders, superintendents, had done all of that work. And then they were able, I learned so much from just their experiences, as opposed to
That
a
makes sense.
professor that never really had yet those type of opportunities. They just went directly in their PhD and they just could talk about theoretical frameworks. Well,
Right.
I mean, how do you fit a theoretical framework when you're going to have, 300 kids planning a food fight? Or you got, I mean, these are real life situations that happen, or cyberbullying issue, or, how do you handle that? Who do you call? What's the protocol? How do you deal with it and mediate so that kids not only we're not just penalizing or consequences, like we're more focusing on the learning component and restoring, right? Creating that restoring justice component for the kids. So it's a learning experience for them. So I would love to really, I think those kind of avenues, like being able to train futures, school leaders, and also teaching, I would on the higher education level, because I do see some of the gaps, between K through 12 education and then, higher education. I think I would love to kind of having both exposure to both. I think that would be a great opportunity. But I think a personal opportunity with all the nonprofit work that I've loved doing, my goal in the next 5 years is to create my own nonprofit. And the idea, it's still looking at, it's a very broad idea, but what I've been kind of trying to play with is actually some of the topics that we've been discussing is how can I mirror people that are coming from, low socioeconomic backgrounds and people of color, couple that with education. How can we minimize that? So the nonprofit I'd love to kind of look into navigating it and creating in the future is one where working with former juveniles and children, adolescents, about to leave the juvenile detention center, and working with them as far as developing all of the skills I just talked about,
Yeah.
their public speaking skills, their professionalism skills, along with, just kind of like a learning center, and then actually working within the community and developing and making sure that these same kids are getting matched with internships within the community. So whether it's with, the big four, the finance sector, accounting sector, or if it's culinary arts, like ensuring that those kids are getting this, these great opportunities and developing their confidence and then really learning what their identity is. I think through that work, them really, developing their confidence, they will learn, I think, more about truly what their identity is, and there will be more possibilities for them. So I would love to, I know it's a very broad right now, vision, but that's something that I've really been, thinking about, and hopefully in the next 5 years, I'll be able to start that work and implement.
Wow. That's incredible, man. Well, let me know if you need some help in the future. I definitely have been thinking about different organizations as well to contribute more. So really, really awesome interview, man. I learned a lot. I really appreciate it again for you speaking with me and sharing really your life experience and your everything that you're doing, which is again incredible. So thank you again for being here.
I appreciate it, Felipe, and same to you. Admire all the, great things, great work you're doing and great leadership you've done and all the humanitarian work you've done in the Denver community in Colorado. So really it is an honor to, have this opportunity. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks so much, man.